here we are. This is part 3. In this video, we're going to talk about how to examine and looking at 18th century Chinese ceramics and how to reasonably get to the point of deciding whether or not they're authentic or later copies. Because as we all know, a huge percentage of what's for sale in the market around the world, and especially the Chinese ceramics and jades and bronzes, they're fakes. This is a massive problem, and the copies and reproductions by far outnumber the number of authentic examples that you're likely to encounter. And always remember that if you sign up to bid online and put your credit card online with an auction house, in the boilerplate of the agreement that you click I agree, in the boilerplate of that agreement is your understanding that you cannot get your money back, basically. The auction house is not responsible by the agreement that the terms of service that you accept, that they're not responsible for misstatements, they're not responsible for omissions, they're not responsible for any misrepresentations. They're completely off the hook. So if you buy something for $5,000 or $10,000 and you find out later it's a total copy and they lied in their advertisement, there's really not much you can do about it. And the federal government could act on it. The federal government could go after these companies, but they simply choose not to because they're involved with so many other cases. What happens to a bunch of antique collectors is a little concern. So always keep that in mind. Always keep that in mind. There is no way out once you buy these pieces. No way out that I'm aware of, unless the auctioneer just decides the goodness of his heart he's going to refund you your money. And I've not heard of that happening yet, and I've been in the business for 45 years. So that'll tell you everything you need to know. Now, on to the 18th century in Kangxi porcelain. All right, I'm going to start with this because this involves a situation that just came up the other day. This is a vase that's being listed at Bonhams in Sydney. And just so those of you that know that subscribe to the global pages or use Patreon to get to the global pages, we've now had to, for the first time, set up 2 grades for Bonhams. One of them is their grade for their London, New York, and Hong Kong operations, and then they have a separate grade for their Sydney and Boston operations. The London and New York and Hong Kong sales, they get a high rating, but the other 2, Sydney and Boston, they've been reduced to a D for misrepresentation. I don't know what's going on at Bonhams. This is just a quick aside, but they better get their act together and hire people that know what they're doing and have some integrity. The sale in Sydney is up, and it's got fakes in it, and they're misrepresenting them, in my opinion. And this is one of them. And I'm going to show you how they misrepresented this. This looks like it's been photoshopped, and I'm going to tell you why. From this photograph, this looks like a pretty convincing Kangxi porcelain vase. It has a Yongzheng mark on the bottom, but it's beautifully done, nice detail and all this. The colors are the soft blue that you do see on Kangxi pieces. They're nice depth of the colors and all that. All right. The problem is that one of my identification assistant customers I said in the video last week, I actually discussed this in the weekly video, and I said, if any of you get copies of the photographs of the bottom of this thing, I would love to see it. And somebody made an inquiry with it the other day and sent me the pictures. And these are the pictures they got from Bonhams. Okay, these weren't pictures they took. These are what Bonhams sent out. All right, that's the vase. Okay. There's a very, very, those of you that are fans of Kangxi porcelain recognize right away, there's a giant difference here. This is what they should look like. That's not what a Kangxi vase should look like at all. Now, they're not selling it as Kangxi. They very cleverly and rather slipperily, if I can use that term, in a slippery way, they just dated it as far as date goes, they said, with Yongzheng mark, but later. They don't say modern. This is a brand new vase. This vase, when I say new, I mean made within the last 20 or 30 years. You look at the bottom of this thing, that foot rim. Remember this foot rim as we go through the 18th century foot rims, and you won't find any that looks like this. It's got a flat face on it. It's got these very deep grooves from trimming tools. It's the wrong color, and this isn't dirt. This is grunge that's been put into it. There's a couple of areas where they've scraped it off to make it look like ware, but that's about it. But this piece is a total fake. And I actually asked them why I sent them a message the other day asking them why they're selling fakes and not identifying them as fakes. And they had several other pieces on there as well that are very suspect. And they're using the old, it might be 20th century. Well, 20th century what? 20th century Republican or 20th century, post George Bush? All right, there's the difference. This is clearly a much later piece. So it's a very illustrative of what we're doing here today. Because from this photograph, if I saw this online, I'd say, gee, it looks pretty good. But if I saw that photograph, I'd say it's a fake. And they did not share online the bottoms of this vase of what it really looks like, probably hoping to catch somebody. And they also gave it a ridiculous estimate of $800 to $1,200. Based on what I'm seeing, it's just dishonest. So keep that in mind. All right, now on to 18th century porcelain. This is an example right here. This is a very nice Kangxi dish. And this isn't, when I'm talking about 18th century, and I'm going to go through the different periods, it's not so important that you know whether it's Yongzheng or Qianlong at this point, if you're just learning this stuff. The most important part is being able to identify, is it from the 18th century? That's what you want to know. Is it 18th century, or is it modern, or is it late 19th century? And we're going to go through the different periods, but I want you to pay most attention to whether it's 18th century or later and learn the differences, because the footrims, for example, in Yongzheng dishes are not necessarily much different than the footrims you're going to see in Qianlong examples, especially early on in the Qianlong period. It's the same kiln, same potters, same everything. So when one emperor died and a new emperor came in, the kilns in Qing didn't suddenly just stop everything, throw away what they were making, and start on a whole new direction. That is not what generally happened. It generally is an evolvement over a period. It evolves what they do over a period of years based on taste and changes in supplies and political things that are going on, and one thing and another. So keep that in mind. All right, now over to this plate. This is a pretty typical Kangxi dish that you're going to find in auctions in America and over in the Netherlands and England and France and everywhere else. About 9 inches in diameter, and this is a Kangxi dish. And one of the things you want to also study before you even look at the footrims, you want to look at the face of the plate and get a sense of how they're decorated. And there's a certain looseness, a certain flow, a certain sort of loose artistry where the artist is painting and interpreting as he goes along. They should never look like they were Xeroxed by the artist who was looking at a drawing or a painting of what he was trying to do and was going along line by line trying to replicate exactly what he saw, because you end up with very stiff, very unnatural looking paintings. The painting on this looks very natural to me. It flows. The building roof line is off a little bit. There's it's sort of a folky aspect to it. The colors are all correct. The reds are not opaque. For example, the newer pieces around today, they have a red on them they use that looks like almost like dried blood. It's very dark, very opaque, and there's no brushwork that's visible. And here you can see the brushwork if you look carefully. You can see the dabs of how they did it and how they painted it on. And when you look at the roof line, it's not completely straight. It's a little off because it was done freehand. You look at the flowers and the leaves and how they're decorated. They're generally outlined in black before they're enameled in. On many, many pieces, it's not really a black color. It's actually a gray tone, and you'll see it often, or it's or there's no outlining at all, and it's just painted onto the piece without any sort of guide as far as outlines go. And you'll see this sometimes on flowers, like down in here. There's not much outlining going on, but this one is outlined. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But it's little things you want to look for. And then when you hop over to the back of the plate, this is the back of it. And this is the very typical footrim of a Kangxi and Yongzheng period dish. It could be either. There's no barrier as far as appearance goes. But you notice it's very thin. It's very delicately trimmed. You're going to find some irregularities in the foot where it may dip a little because the trimming tool caught something, or it got stuck in the kiln a little bit and a piece of it came off. That's not unusual on foot rims. And this one, over here, you see these little dimples. Here, those are from the trimming process. Those are natural. They don't always appear, but often they do. And then when you look at places where the dirt and the surface is worn a little bit, like up in here, or maybe that's a little nick, you see this beautiful white porcelain. And over here in the reflection, always use reflections to help you look at things. You'll see that this is fairly smooth. There's a slight wave to it, but it's not a heavy orange peel. You don't see a lot of orange peel in 18th century ceramics typically. You see them much more toward the end of the 18th century and into the 19th century. You see lots of it. But in general, you don't see much of it, much orange peel or waves, too much waviness in the glazes. So always keep that in mind. So if you see a piece that you think is early 18th century blue and white, and it has a wavy surface to it and enamels, it's not right. All right, and then over to this is a blue and white example with a Dutch ship on it. You notice how they drew the sails. They look like parachutes because they had, not a great understanding or visual knowledge of the boats. And then you have these wonderfully done fish going around the whole plate with the boy coming in from the side with his rope, his vine, and so forth. Another fish over here. But notice the outlining, the cobalt color, and how they did it, and the whiteness of the porcelain. All right, and then when you flip this piece over, you have this. This is the back of it. This was sold by Bob McPherson over in Europe. Very good dealer. He sells great things. You can rely on him, that's for sure. And then you have this foot rim is a little bit chewed up, maybe from being caught in a kiln, maybe from being put down too hard on a granite countertop. You don't really know, but sometimes you can get this look on the bottoms of plates when they've been in the kiln and fired, and when they go to take the plate out, it sticks a little bit and it gives up a little bit of the foot, and that's not uncommon. But look at the color of this foot rim. It's got sort of a tannish ivory tone to it, and you see this often on these neatly trimmed, thinly trimmed, and you have these little gaps in the bottom like this of these plates, and you're going to see a lot of these gaps appear in the bottoms of dishes and vases when you go through this. It's a very typical problem on these wares. And then there's this Kangxi bowl. It's shaped like it has cartouches shaped like lotus flowers, and then it's painted in with more flowers. All right, and they did a nice job here. This is a very typical way that they decorate them. If they're going particularly with only underglazed blue, they will do similar patterns. Sometimes with these cartouches, sometimes they run more vertically, but in other words, the way they're divided up into sections. But the cobalt decorations are all very similar. There's sort of a fluidity to them, a randomness to them. They don't have a lot of precision. Every section is a little bit different, but they're all very complementary to one another. And then when you look on the top of the bowl, you notice here there's a lot of glaze missing. That's fritting. And fritting was a common problem, especially with Kangxi pieces on the edges and on the corners of things. You'll often see the glaze missing. The fritting is caused by air bubbles that form during the firing process, and then eventually they pop and get knocked off. And here's a view of the side of the bowl. Very typical, but very neatly done. The glaze runs almost all the way up to the foot. Normally there's a bit more of a gap there, but this one they did all the way in. And this is what a foot rim can look like on one of these. And then the apple green Kangxi jar with a white lip on it. Notice again this high foot, very dense porcelain. And on these greenwares, they would often add iron dressing to the foot to turn it brown. It was sort of a tradition. Here it is. This was a jar I had a number of years ago that we sold. And notice how neatly the iron dressing goes up in here and then goes right to the edge of the glaze. And this way, when you put it in a stand, the stand edge comes right up to the bottom of where the glaze stops. And all of this is inside the stand, all these brown areas, so you never see it unless you pick the piece up. And notice also the crackle on the bottom. It's in a sort of a creamy ivory tone, but often these crackle monochromes also have crackled bases. And you'll also see on red wares, for example, copper glaze pieces, they often have sort of a greenish crackle bottom to them. There's sort of almost like it's not quite a celadon, but it's a light celadon color, and it's not uncommon. In this one, it's sort of a cream color, but you often see this effect on these pieces. It was a very nice little jar actually. And then the Kangxi stem cup. These are fairly well known. They produced a lot of them. A lot of them turned up in the Netherlands and in England and so forth. This one's interesting because it has its original lid. They don't often, and it has a little chip out of the finial, that teardrop finial on top. But that's not unusual. But again, you have this same sort of Kangxi decoration with the blue outlining and then filling in. And here they used a white outline to create sort of a shadow effect by letting the white surface appear in between. And but this is all this sort of fat, meaty looking the way they did them. There's sort of a heavy painting, very rounded. This is how they did their painting on these. And then when you flip the thing over, this is what the bottom is going to look like. And it's not always exactly like this, but this is a fairly typical example. The foot on this has been cleaned, so it's a little hard to see, but you've got this very neatly trimmed foot. Again, you have this edge here that goes up to that upper edge right here, this upper edge here where you see the glaze stops. So this was meant to sort of fit in a stand or on a table and to conceal that the longer foot that's exposed. And again, you notice the gap in the glaze in the bottom, very typical. All right, and then this is an 18th century. It's a Kangxi period Ping vase, celadon, with brown dressing on the rim, and it's got a lighter colored, much softer green, almost a grayish green interior inside, and then this very nice deep green on the outside. And again, you have this high foot with that sharp edge for fitting into a stand. And if you flip the thing over, that's what it looked like on the bottom. And it was a very nice, this was something we had in inventory for not long. Actually, it sold very quickly. This very nice, very smooth. You notice how smooth that edge is. When they trimmed this, they did it with enormous precision and care, so that when you touch this, kind of foot, it's going to feel just like glass. It's going to be extremely smooth. You won't feel, in most cases, the little black bumps and things. But if you come over here, where the piece has been in contact with surfaces and tables and stands and whatnot over the years, it's gotten a little bit of wear on it, and you'll see how smooth and white that is. And that's what's underneath all this. All this discoloration is on the surface. And if you got through it down to here, you would have very nice white porcelain, maybe with a few little black spots in it. This red area here is from iron oxide that was in the paste that reacted during the firing process. All right. And then over to this, another Kangxi bowl. This is an interesting bowl. I bought it from a lady in England, got a hold of me. She was looking to sell it. And I was kind of surprised she didn't call somebody in England. There's a lot of dealers over there, but she called me. And I got it. I was thrilled to get it. I loved this bowl. It was a very nice Kangxi bowl. It had belonged to her grandfather. And notice the fluidity of the way the phoenix is drawn. It's not stiff or angular at all. Everything is curved. Everything is moving. There's a real good sense of movement and motion. And a lot of the copies are very stiff, and they look like they're frozen photographs in time. They don't look natural. And the stuff that was painted in the day there's a lot of fluidity and a lot of art in the hands of the painter. They weren't copying from photographs and books. They had rough drawings that they were mimicking and learning how to do, and shown, well, put a phoenix there, put a dragon on this side, put some blossoming peonies in the middle, and so forth. So you end up with this very exuberant flower on the inside of the bowl, and then this rather animated looking phoenix fleeing off, and on the other side of the bowl there was a dragon. So there you go. And this is the bottom of it. That's what it looks like. A fairly deep recessed bottom, but very neatly trimmed foot rim. That's a beautifully trimmed foot, slightly rounded, very white, with a few little impurities and bits and bumps and whatnot, like you expect to see. Runs all the way around, but perfectly trimmed, and the glaze is a nice even line all the way up, and runs very evenly around the inside. Sometimes they drape a little bit, they sag in places, you see that sometimes, but sometimes when they get it right, it goes right to the edge in a beaded line, and it looked like this. And then there was this one. This was a bowl we had a few years ago, and I bought it at an auction in Connecticut, and it's a wonderful bowl. This is one of the favorite bowls I've ever had, Kangxi bowls. And it's an allegorical a battle scene. It's got a silver rim on it. It was about 8 or 9 inches in diameter, and it was in absolutely perfect condition. Here's the bottom of it. And on bowls like this, heavier bowls, they can make them with these sort of fat, rounder foot rims. And we'll see a few of these, but this is what they look like. And it's almost like a bull nose, like the edge of a staircase, where they are the rounded head of the tread of the stair. Very fat, very thick, very rounded. But you'll see there's lots of legitimate wear here. All this wear, this smoothing process. A lot of this is discoloration. Some of it's from firing, But here you can see where it's been rubbing on surfaces has gone through that very, very pure white. It just has a double circle on the bottom. There was no rain mark put on this, which is not unusual in Kangxi pieces. They have no rain mark or Qianlong marks as often, or more often actually, than they have actual marks of the Kangxi period. But here you have this very nice, even, flat foot rim. And that's a very classic type. All right. And there's another shot of it here, a little bit closer. And you can actually see the tool marks right here. These are the tools that he used to cut along and trim up this inside of the foot rim. And then on the outside, it was a very, very good workmanship here, spectacular. And then there's this. These types of bowls turn up. They're always Kangxi. I've not seen a lot of copies of these yet, but I'm sure they're working on it. And they were typically made in 3 colors. They were made in green, aubergine, and yellow most of the time. And they use the colors that they use to decorate mostly. Like here's the yellow, there's the aubergine, and here's the green. And sometimes you'll have it reversed. But the shape of these bowls is very typical. They have these sort of wide flaring mouths. There's sort of a biscuit arrangement. And when you flip the piece over, that's what it looks underneath. You have one of these gaps, these creeping gaps here in the glaze. Another one over here, a couple of other little impurities. Double circle, and you've got that square seal that they use. You also see it on Kutani, a very similar mark on Kutani wares from Japan. That's an aside, doesn't mean anything. And then you have this foot rim, and again, a very nice, even white foot. There's an nice natural iron oxide line. You will see some cases where the potters will add rusty water and do all kinds of things to make the foot rim turn orange. But usually they look so orange, they look almost radioactive, so it's pretty obvious what's happening. But this is a legitimate one, and that's what the bottom of it should look like. Oh, I wanted to mention too that when these get done and I get these all uploaded, I'm gonna upload all of the images onto bitamount.com on our blog site over at the website, and you can go and refresh your memory with photographs anytime you want. And then on to this, the Dragon Bowl, Kangxi period Dragon Bowl. You recognize this bowl. They made them in a number of periods. This is not a unique design by any stretch. Again, getting back to the point that when one period ended, they didn't suddenly stop everything and do something else. You'll find Yongzheng examples of this bowl. You'll find Qianlong examples, Qing examples, Daoguan examples. I don't know if you see any Guangzhou examples, but all of those, they all kept making them, and they do turn up in the sale rooms and in good galleries around the world. This is a sort of a nice one. It's not an extraordinary one, but it's a more typical one. And the first thing you notice here at the top is that there's a little bit of fritting, edge fritting, which is typical with Kangxi pieces. And then you have this tone of this blue, looks fine for Kangxi. And then the decoration, very nicely done, black and gray outlines everywhere, and then filled in with colors. And then if you flip the piece over, it looks like what you'd think for a Marken period Kangxi bowl. It's got a very nice white foot over here. It's been worn a little bit. It's a little brighter white just from being around and being on tables. And then the Kangxi mark in the middle. And then, more views of the foot down below here. Very smooth, very white, very creamy, and so forth. But the whole bowl has to add up, because the foot rims of this type can be replicated today. You can't go solely by this. You have to look at the entire piece and look at the colors, look at the design. All of the elements that should be there should add up. And if one of them doesn't, you should be suspicious. Maybe it's one of the colors is off, a wrong shade of yellow for the period, wrong shade of blue, and you need to learn the colors in order to spot them. And then you need to make sure that the colors you're seeing, as we saw with that Kangxi style dragon vase at the very beginning, you saw what the photograph of what they used in the listing was, which I think was altered. It doesn't seem natural to me. And then you see what it looked like in person with a bit of natural light. They look like two different pieces. So you want to make sure you have good natural lit photographs. And then from there you can compare colors. But be very careful of photos online, because they can alter the colors. And then another Kangxi example, blue and white dish. This one with redhead with herons flying around, redheaded herons flying around, floating clouds and so forth within a sort of tea fret border. And on the back of it, there is a Kangxi mark, and it's got a break over here. That's not from the firing, but the rest of the foot is fine, and it does give you a good look at what it should look like. White, creamy glaze, slightly trimmed in places. It's not completely flat. It kind of looks flatter here than it was, but there's a little bit of a bevel there. And notice the nice brush strokes on this. I love the way the guy did the seal on this. This was done with an enormous amount of confidence. I like the way he did it. Very strong, not too thin, good brush strokes, and he really filled the area to do it. This was a fairly good sized plate, so the mark was fairly large. So there you go. And then there's this plate. This is in the Palace Museum in Beijing, and it's a wonderful example. I've looked at it a bunch of times. My only gripe is I think they got the color wrong because they shot it on this gray paper, and there may have been some gray paper in front of it. It made it look a little darker. It's not quite as sapphire blue as I suspect it probably is in person, but the decoration on this is meticulous and phenomenal. It has a copper rim around it, all kinds of things. This is a beautiful, beautiful example. As I recall, this plate is pretty big. It's a 15-inch charger or something like that. And here's the back of it. Very, very attractive with the fungi plant on there. But notice the foot rim. The foot rim on here, they did a really good job shooting the foot, so you can actually pull it in, take a very good look at it. And there you have it. There's the wall of that foot. This foot is fairly flat. It was trimmed very, very nicely. You don't see flat foot rims very often on Kangxi dishes. Occasionally they did do them, of course. And here you have it. This is one. And you'll find some impurities and chewed up areas and whatnot. And there may be from banging it around a little bit. It may have bumped some things. These things look like areas where it got stuck during the firing process. When they lifted the plate out, it pulled off and left behind a little bit of the clay, because you can see some areas here and here that are like that. But in general, this is what a foot rim should look like. And also notice the glaze around it. It sort of has a little bit of a wavy tone, only on the bottom, not on the face of the plate. You won't see this above here. Like if you look here, there is none. There's no waviness, there's no nothing. But on the bottom where the plate is flat, the glaze sort of sags a little bit and causes this. This is actually like gravity causing little bits of pooling on the glaze until it hardens. And it's not a true orange peel. It's just a bit of waviness caused by being glazed and then sitting this way, and the glaze sort of pulls down. But you also end up with lots of little spots and whatnot showing up, and little dots and things, little bubbles popping through the glaze and so forth. Very typical of these. And there's that mark on the bottom. All right, and then over to this, the twisted bottle or decanter. It's a double spout version. These turn up. They were very popular in Europe. In the Netherlands, you see these all the time, and in parts of England, you'll come across these in antique shops. They were sort of a thing for a while. And this is a Kangxi example, and they did do these. And again, like the bowl that had the lappets on it, this is another variation. This is more of a twisted version with these sort of vines going in twisted rows going up the piece to the twin spouts, and then they tip off to the sides. But again, you have this very nice light blue and this very attractive dark blue, and then a darker blue that was used for the outlining. And again, nice loose drawing, and then a fairly high foot that's left glazed, because the bottom of this does have a flat bottom. And this is how they did them. So they stood up nice and even. And there's a Kangxi base. You'll notice the decorator, or the potter rather, put a little beveled edge in here and went over there and so forth, and then glazed the inside of it and dropped an artisanal leaf in. But notice the quality of the paste. The problem today is that a lot of the pieces are very white and they're not too dissimilar, but they haven't got the artwork quite figured out yet. And then over to this Kangxi biscuit ware piece of Shaolu. Very nicely done. I love his face. His face is great. This was one of ours. Love it. And you have this very nice red and green and aubergine enamels and all that side decoration. Very, very attractive. And the yellow is translucent, and in places it's lighter and darker. And this is one of the things you want to look for. You want to look at them and say, is it an opaque color, or is it slightly translucent? Does it shift in shades a little bit as you look across it? Because it should in many, many cases, especially on biscuit wares. And here you have this very, very nice red. Again, that red color. It's not thick and opaque. It's rather translucent, and it looks, at times it can look rather dry. All right, and you flip it over, that's what the bottom of it looks like. This very nice white Chinese Kangxi porcelain paste, but you have some irregularities in here and so forth because this was laid out as a flat slab, and apparently it had a few wrinkles. Something affected the surface here, so you have a few irregularities and whatnot. But this was never a big concern with these because they were meant to be stood up and and looked at. Nobody was supposed to be looking at the bottoms of these. And then the artist again, the potter then beveled it again, and the figure was most likely made in some type of a mold arrangement and then finished by hand. And then you have this very nice white clay. And on the new examples, typically what you see is this piece, the bottom of this is as smooth as glass. The hole, it looks like it was done with a drill, and it looks absolutely perfect and completely flat with no beveling. And that's one of the copies. And then over to this Kangxi triple gourd celadon with peony blossoms on it and vines. Very nicely done. This was a very, very nice vase. And you flip this on its top, and again, you've got this very high foot meant to go into a stand, and this very, very precise edge. It's amazing how sharp that edge is. And when you think about some of the pieces, they got so sloppy glazing in the late 19th century, they sort of just spilled over and ended up getting stuck, and they had to chisel them off. Here they just stopped it. They had absolute control over it. The bottom of it was a white, just a very, very thinly glazed, almost like an ash glaze on the white paste. Didn't have a white creamy glaze on it, and you can see it here. It looks almost like dried sugar. And then over on the side here, you can see all the trim marks from the potter. Again, this very nice, thick, deep foot, and very compact. The clay is always very compact. But you will see changes in clays as you go through the 18th and 19th century because the sources of the kaolin changed. They had a number of mines that they drew their raw materials from, and when they got low in one, they would start looking for another mine to draw the kaolin from. So you sometimes will see some pretty interesting changes in the color of the paste. So you have to recognize and know that, oh yeah, well that's from a different source. And sometimes they even went back to old. They would go back if they ran low in a new place. Sometimes they would go back to an old place because there was still enough there to do some good pieces, and they would go back and reopen a mine and get some more out of it. All right, and then you have these garlic head pair of sort of archaistic mask form Kangxi vases. Again, they have this rather nice high foot again to fit into a stand. And when you flip them over, there it is. This is that interior foot, very typical. I saw a similar foot on the celadon vase, and I think 4 other pieces that we've looked at all have the same treatment. You generally don't see that treatment on new pieces. That's not to say they couldn't, and they may well at some point, but for now they're not doing it. And again, you have this very, very nice cobalt color, very white porcelain, very, very white over here. And the decoration, of course, is typical of the period with the masks. And then this is a piece of wutsai with very nice translucent yellows. And again, this gets to the point I was talking about a while ago where the yellows come and go in intensity. You have this area here, it's a little darker than this area. This area is lighter, that area is darker. You expect to see that, and you'll see it with other pigments as well. The aubergine enamel should be fairly translucent with the white pushing through it. The same thing with the greens. You'll have shifts in intensity of color with the mid-range greens. The darker greens tend to be more opaque. But the light greens and the aubergine will have shifts in color more often, and the yellow, of course, will too. And then when you flip the piece over, that's what the bottom of it looks like, again with the square seal and this very nicely done white foot rim. Now, this bowl was broken when I bought it. It came out of a collection of a scholar, and I just wanted to have it as an example. But this is what it looks like underneath. And as I said before, the glaze doesn't always go perfectly and neatly up to the foot. Here it is here, almost at the top of the foot rim. And over here, it's sort of, as I said, drapes down a little bit. That's rather typical, so don't be surprised if you see that. And then this Kangxi, this is one of the great Kangxi plates of all time. It's a battle scene with wonderful border decoration and border dividers with these, I love these sort of banded columns they've got coming down, and then banded columns here again with a archaistic sort of grid above it. And then in the middle, you have the scene of horses galloping through beneath a willow tree. It's very nice, wonderful. wonderful looking porcelain. And over here is the back of it. It has a Qianlong mark on it, which they often did on Kangxi wares, but notice the foot rim. Beautifully done, narrow, thinly trimmed, with a slight ivory tone to it. Here's a little better angle on the foot. So the inside of it, this would be the outside of the foot. It comes in like this, and then the inside of the foot rim goes down like that. So it's sort of like a wedged angle. And you'll see more of these V-shaped sort of foot rims in Yongzheng pieces as well. All right, very typical. And then you have this. This is in the British Museum, and it's an unusual piece, but it's sort of a mess too, because it's got all these impurities in the white glaze. Something happened during the firing of this, and maybe some ash got kicked up or something. But you'll see it all through here. This was a beautifully decorated thing, and it was very interesting for a lot of. I think there's some famous allegory, story that goes with the figures here, and it has this rather nice silver rim added to the top. And then the bottom of it, again, they had a lot of problems firing this apparently, because it's got this massive separation in the bottom right through the mark, and then all these bits of ash in here. And this is in the British Museum, just so you know. And a lot of kiln grit over here. And then you have this sort of wide rounded foot like we've seen in a few other pieces, with a ware ridge right here, that ware ridge running right around it, and so forth. So you will see these, but this is a Kangxi example. It had a lot of problems when it was being made, and the British Museum, for whatever reason, I think because of the story behind it, decided to hang on to it. But it's a very interesting bit. All right, and then over to this. This is also in the British Museum. This is done I believe this is the one with the Yongzheng mark on it, but it was made during the Kangxi period. They used Yongzheng marks and Qianlong marks were often used on copies on Kangxi pieces. And this is a nice example with loads of hard enamels. It has this very rich oak egg yolk enamel on it. And you'll notice in the ground color, there are shifts as well. You'll have a dark brown area here, and then it shifts here. On contemporary pieces, there doesn't seem to be much color shifting going on. It's all one solid, massive color. You should see some color shifts in the ground color if they've used a green or a red or a yellow, or in this case, it looks like butterscotch almost. And then you have the gentleman here, and their faces are sort of quickly and almost crudely drawn in. And then, details added, eyes and ears, and then the clothing. The bodies are slightly distorted with the outlining, and then they use the green enamels to fill it in. You'll notice they get light around the edges, and that's partly to highlight the difference between the sleeve and the body of the shirt. It helps you be able to see it a little bit better. And then up here, they had this fellow in this sort of bluish gray shirt here, and then it goes darker down here, and then you have green, lighter green, and so forth. So those are little things you want to look at on these. This bowl you're not going to see. And then at the bottom, you notice here how the glaze thickened up and got rather dark as it neared the foot. But it didn't go over the foot, which is sort of a miracle. And there's the bottom of it. Yeah, Qing mark. Ming Dynasty mark, but Kangxi period. And again, you have one of these things on the bottom with all these little spots and almost looks like mold on there. And that's just from stuff in the kilns when it was fired. It got on there. The interior of the bowl, I believe, is aubergine, and then with figures and flowers and whatnot on it. And there you have the foot with a little iron oxide line on the inside. Very nice, wide, white foot, slightly rounded. And it would probably clean up quite a bit, but I don't know how often the British Museum cleans their porcelain. And then over here you can see the trim work around the edge. And these will give you some ideas of what you want to see as far as colors go. Then there's this thing, this Langyao vase that's in the Palace Museum collection. There's their logo down at the bottom. I didn't want to cut that out. It reminds me where the stuff comes from. And beautifully glazed with these shifts in colors in the body, just glowing. And here's the bottom of it. And the foot on this is quite dirty. If this was cleaned properly, it would be quite white. It would be quite light in color. But it allows you, because it's dirty, you can see the contours of it. And you can see this ridge right here, which indicates the foot is almost a V shape here, and then goes down, and then hits the glazed area and goes down to the floor of the bottom of the vase. But very nicely done. And again, on this, you see the same sort of interior foot wall that you see on other Kangxi pieces. Very straight, very even, very intentional. And then the yellow bowls. The Palace Museum has a couple of these, and what's really interesting about them is that they're nearly identical. and they have nearly identical marks. They're so similar, it's a little bit creepy. It's strange. It almost looks, when I looked at them, I thought, gee, why did they put the same bowl in twice? And I just realized, no, that's how well they were making them. And here's a picture of the base of this piece. Kangxi mark. It's not done terribly well. There's some mistakes in it. There's some bubbles, some impurities and whatnot, but it's definitely a Kangxi bowl, imperial bowl, and wonderfully done. That flattened outer edge from the trimming tool coming in, very white porcelain and so forth. All right, you want to see all those things on these, especially the bowls. Okay, and then that's the Kangxi wares. And there's quite a bit of them there. And then you get over to the Yongzheng period, you get things like this, very feminine, very pretty, beautiful enamels, lovely pinks. Everything on this has it going for it. Notice, again, the freeness. Even though this is a fairly formal piece of porcelain, there's a certain amount of looseness, relaxedness to the drawing. The bird's neck has a little bit of a bend in it. The flowers are sort of going off in their own directions. There's sort of a random unstiffness to how they painted these. They flowed like regular paintings on canvas. They didn't look like stiff copies. All right, very, very nicely done. This is a very lovely brush pot. I'm not sure where this one is. It's either in the British Museum or the Palace Museum. It's a fantastic example. And here's a picture of the bottom of it. Again, you got another one of those gaps in the bottom, not unusual. And here's the footrim. And you can actually see the shadow here with a knife cut. You got a cut on the inside where the glaze stops just on a razor's edge. Then it comes up, and then you have this one little facet here where it's trimmed, and then over. So there's the edge of the bottom of the foot right there, and it's got a little whiteness to it from counterware and surface wear, and then it tapers down the other side. Very typical of these. And you'll notice that there's a decidedly blue tinge on the white glaze on the bottom. That was something the potters did sometimes. They would add a little bit of cobalt. All right, and then there's this. This is a ruby. I believe this is one of the ruby back plates, because these are always of great interest to people, and often matters of debate, because there are some examples floating around that are very hard to identify because some of the elements in them, but the feed on them is often a big indicator because they're so thin. The later copies tend to be a bit thicker. But at any rate, here's the front of the plate, and notice the looseness of the drawing, the way the woman's robes come down. They just sort of flop into place. The children's robes are sort of flopping into place. There's a fluidity to all of this. And then you have the peonies in the background blossoming on the table with all the little scholars' objects and incense burners and whatnot. And she's sitting here with some students who are doing something with a rabbit. I'm not sure what the deal is with the rabbit, a pet rabbit. They did have pet rabbits in China, though. They were rather fond of them. And there's another one in front here, and a bunch of kids running around the way kids would if there were a bunch of rabbits around. But very nicely done. And then this very, very lovely soft pink repeat pattern, like a honeycomb pattern almost on the rim. And then here you have these green areas here. Very, very attractive. And if you flip it over, there's your ruby back plate. Notice right off the bat where the light is, you always look in photographs to where the light is reflecting on the other areas of the porcelain, like this, these, because you can get a sense of the surface, what the surface is like. And this is what the surface on ruby back should look like, sort of like very, very tiny orange peel, but not regular. They're irregular in their patterning. If you look at them, they sort of go all over the place. The copies that have orange peel on them are almost patterned. They're like waves. There's one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, a little bit too perfectly. But then you have on the bottom here, you've got this very nice and very narrow foot. Notice how narrow this foot is, because eggshells, these ruby backs were very thin porcelains. They were done almost an eggshell porcelain, so the paste they were working was quite thin. So when they went to do the foot rim was very, very thin as well. And this is it. That brown line in the center of the foot rim is just from being on a stand or something, because I think there's another one in there that doesn't have any of that. All right, and then you have this classic Yongzheng sort of lotus type dish with that very, very dense famille rose enamel that they used here. In the Yongzheng period, they used them also in the Qianlong period, but in the Yongzheng period, it was notable because the darkest of the red was still glowed beautifully, had beautiful color, but it was fairly opaque, but tapered off to white edges like this, down into here and here. You'd have all these little white edges, and that helped you see the definition in the flower. Like here, they use little white edges to show the outlining, the tips of all the petals on the flower, and so forth. And you want to look for those, and then you have this beautiful, almost like fish egg outer border here, and the greens are very bright, they're very strong. Always try to look at the colors outside of the context of the piece. Say, does that color look right? And in this case, all the colors look absolutely fine. And then when you flip the piece over, you pull this up, and you have this ivory sort of foot rim here, going over to here. There's a little pit where it pulled off when it was taken maybe out of the kiln. It got put down a bit too hard on a countertop. But that, again, is another classic 18th century. Don't think of it as particularly Yongzheng or Qianlong. Just think of it as 18th century. All right. And then over to this very, very white, rather unusual plate. Yongzheng period, extremely white though, very reminiscent of Kangxi wares, with a woman again sitting at a table attending to a child who's got an instrument. It looks like he's blowing it, like a pan flute. It looks like he's blowing into, or some sort of musical thing, and she's instructing him. And again, you have this very similar barrel like you had in the last picture on the ruby back plates. You have another one behind the sitter here, and wearing these beautiful pink robes, again flowing, very relaxed. Notice how the robes look very relaxed and flowing. She's got a book out on the table and so forth, and then these sprigs of flowers just sort of sprinkled around. They don't repeat. They're all different. Each group of flowers is a slightly different thing. They are not a repeat pattern. All right. On the copies, they often just do a repeat. So it's the same spray here that you're going to see over here, the same one you see over here. They're not the same. They are very complementary to one another, but they are not the same. All right. And then moseying along to the back of it, this is another one of these ruby back affairs. Again, very, very white foot here. This one has been cleaned, I think. It looks like it has been. But it gives you a sense of how small the foot rim was on these. They were very, very delicately done because they were so thin. Beautiful white back. Absolutely beautiful piece. And then you come over to things like this, these rondelles of butterflies. The trouble that the copyists get into when they make butterflies is that they skimp on the details, and you can't skimp on the details with these. So you have these very, very nice areas here where it almost looks like an optical illusion, like a three-dimensional thing with the butterflies disappearing into the ball. And he's not. It's just it's the way the artist did it, and lots of little details on the wings. Very, very typical. And then the inside of it looks like this. Loads and loads of little dots have been added here to add some context to the lighting and the shape of the wings. And then the same thing goes down here, and then all through here, all this decoration. And on reproductions, you typically don't see that anymore. But also the colors are absolutely correct. Colors and workmanship. And then here you have the bottom of that bowl, very nice white foot rim with a few little irregularities and bumps in it, but nothing extraordinary. And over here it looks very smooth, like where it's been on a counter. This is the only picture I could get of this foot rim, so I apologize. But you can see that it's, again, sort of trimmed on the outside up, and then the foot rim on the inside comes up to it, and it creates, again, this sort of V formation. All right, and then over to this. This is a very dangerous type of bowl. These turn up. There's the mark on the bottom, and there's the front of it. The new copies look so much like the originals. In general, I tell people, if you see these, don't go near them. These green bowls with these patterns on them. This one is an old one. It's got some color shifts in the enamels. The workmanship is very, very good, and so forth. But the copies are really good too. But on the bottom, if you look at it carefully, if you saw just the foot rim, you wouldn't be able to tell anything. But when you look at the rest of if you look at the mark rather, you wouldn't be able to tell anything. But you look at the foot rim, and it's very nicely trimmed. It's very rounded. Looks absolutely fine. And down in here, where the light is reflecting, you can see the irregularities in the white glaze that you cannot see here. Here it looks like it's an absolutely perfectly white, smooth area at a glance. But when you get down there, you realize that it isn't. This is just the angle the camera was on, and that's what it looks like. Actually, if you were to look across it with a glancing light off of it, you would see some irregularities. And over here on this side of the foot, looks very, very good as well. But if you see one of these at an auction and it's not one of the major auction houses, you should probably just forget it. All right, and this is maybe one of the most copied types of vases of the 18th century there is. I've lost track of how many of these I've seen. All those rascals down in Georgia seem to get them by the boatload. U.S. Poly Group out in California, which has no relation to Poly in China. They're two entirely different companies. They seem to have an endless supply of these as well. But this is, I'm pretty sure it's them that gets them all the time. And they're nicely done. This is an original. And it's this very soft aubergine. Notice the dragon, how well the dragon's head is done. The greens and yellows all look perfectly fine. The problem is that with the reproductions, they look very good too. They get people in a lot of trouble. But the bottom of it, they haven't gotten quite right yet. And this is an old one. So you have this sort of rounded, slight ridging from the trimming tools on the foot rim. And then the unglazed foot goes straight to the bottom, and then it's glazed. So there's no interior wall that's glazed on this. This is all foot rim left unglazed until it gets to the interior of the recessed base where the rest supports the mark. And that's what it looks like. All right. And then this is a very dangerous type of vase. These are made, and they copy these all the time. And the reason they're dangerous is they're easy to make. All you need is a guy that's got a really good potting eye, and he could form this vase. And it's beautifully formed. This very thin mouth coming down, this very, very pretty feminine neck on it, and this sloping shoulder, and then around and then tapering back in. And there's not a lot on this vase that tips off its age, unless you get around to looking at the bottom carefully, and the bottom of it looks quite good. But they can copy this bottom. This is one of the things that they're starting to get to. They're beginning to be able to copy these foot rims on this type of vase, which basically means that in the future you may not be able to sell one even if it's legitimate unless it's been in a noted collection for a long time. It's going to go the way of Tang pottery went, where basically stuff that's from newly discovered or from, even if from old estates, but they haven't been recorded and Oxford tested, they're almost impossible to sell now. And then you have this beautiful vase, Yongzheng period, extremely rare, imperial, and that's what the foot should look like, minus all the Palace Museum stickers, of course. And here's another piece. Now these often when these have turned up, this pattern, with the dragon on it, done in this manner, like clouds and rue heads, they think it's often Kangxi period. This isn't. This is Yongzheng. And it's a very nice one, very soft glaze on it. Not a matte glaze, but it's not a high gloss glaze. And this beautiful cobalt decoration and the way it's drawn, and the potting of the piece is very, very attractive. And then when you flip it over, here it is with the mark. Foot rim on this is not too dissimilar from the piece we just looked at. Quite similar, as a matter of fact. There it is. All right, very sort of similar, rounded. This one is a little whiter. It may have been cleaned, but it's a very similar type of foot. Very small, very narrow, neatly trimmed, and then it goes to a slight V end on it. And then hopping along over to this is the tea dust glaze vase. Of course, this is one of the best tea dust vases I think in the world. It's an amazing piece of porcelain, and has sort of an ancient style to it. It's almost reminiscent of like some Han pieces that you see. But notice the glaze on it, the green glaze. There's little irregularities in the surface here, and you can see where some of the glaze pooled up on the shoulder here, between here and here, and then pulls up a lot on the foot rim down in here, where it almost looks like wrinkled skin. It's just the glaze the tea dust glaze got so thick it just sort of dried out and crinkled right at the top of the foot. It's wonderful. And then under here, one of the things you do see on these monochromes, including Lang Yao and Sang de Bouffe and flambe glaze and tea dust glazes, the marks sometimes aren't terribly well done. And this is something they apparently gave allowances for. We're going to see some others as we go along where they have pretty horrible looking rain marks on their bottoms. This is just a 4-character Yongzheng mark, but beautiful, beautiful bottom. And again, you have this rounded, wide, bull-nosed foot, not too dissimilar to what you see on Kangxi, on those couple of Kangxi pieces. Again, the point is it's 18th century. That's what you want to home in on, 18th century versus 19th. All right, and here you have a peach moon flask with a peach on the front of it. Pretty typical type, wonderful. This is in the Palace collection as well. And when you flip this one over, it's got, again, this sort of brown dressed foot under here, and then you have this, the base of it is brown, and the mark is almost unreadable, and it's a Yongzheng mark. And this was made for the Palace. But they just didn't get the mark quite right. But I think because of the difficulty in firing these, they didn't demand that the marks be absolutely perfect. So I think that's probably how these survived, because they realized it would be hopeless if you're going to wait to get the perfect, only accept pieces with perfect marks on them because of the nature of the material. So so this is what they often look like, often. All right. And then there's another shot of it. And then there's this Daosai enamel Yongzheng small vase. This was about that big. We had it. We sold it many years ago, and but beautifully decorated. Beautiful Daosai enamels with a square mouth on it. It had a tiny nick in the top of the mouth right here. It had a little chip in it, but other than that, it was fine. And this very nice, lovely, light, translucent green running down it. And there's the bottom of it with the Yongzheng mark. Very nicely done, white foot, perfectly finished, and glazed right up to there, and then the rest of it's all unglazed foot rim. And then hopping along over to this, the grisaille decorated teapot, just a wonderful example. And this could be Yongzheng, this could be Qianlong. You can't say with too much definition when this was done, but it was a beautiful grisaille decorated pot. It had an old break to the handle, I remember, but it was wonderful decoration, 18th century, of course. And there's the foot rim under it. Very nicely done. Notice that slight ivory tone up here, few imperfections in the paste, and then nicely trimmed all around the inside, very smooth, wonderful finish, and then glazed from there on up. Absolutely great looking thing. And then you get along, and now you're into the Qianlong period. We're getting there. And the Qianlong dishes are not going to be enormously different, and the vases are not going to be enormously different in many ways from Yongzheng and Qianlong. They're all in that 18th century club, and there are similarities that run between all of them. This is a Qianlong memorial dish, a Hamilton collection. Again, you have this very nicely trimmed out foot, fairly narrow, almost square, but with a slight roundedness on the top. Nice looking thing. And then you have this. This is an export platter, and of course platters are different because they tend to have slightly concave, unglazed flat backs because they had to sit on tabletops, and they don't get a lot of wear because they're not used as much as other dishes. But this was a very nice one, and when you flip it over, that's what it looks like. And it's the arms of Dyke. Is the crest on the front, and you'll notice that the foot rim on here though has almost no sign of any wear. Now this is a tannish paste that the porcelain turned into during the firing. This isn't dirt. If you watch this, it wouldn't change color. Some of these export platters of the late 18th century have sort of a different color. A different color in the clay. And I think it had to do with because maybe they changed sources of where they were getting some of their clays for export wares, and it was a little darker in tone because they're going to glaze it in white anyway, so what difference does it make? And you'll also see little bits of kiln grit up here at the top, and you'll see kiln grit around here on the edges. Do not be surprised to see kiln grit on the foot rims of export pieces of the late 18th and 19th century. And then there's this armorial crest plate. Again, beautifully decorated. The gilding is in good shape on it. What was curious about it was I didn't see any indication that anybody wrote in a motto down here in this banner at the bottom. Usually they do, something in Latin. And for some reason, it was never done on this plate. I don't know why. Maybe they were planning on adding something when it got to Europe. I don't know. But this is the typical color scheme of some of these armorial wares. Very nicely done. And here's the back of it. Again, identical foot to the one we just looked at, pretty much the same type of back. And again, this bluish tinge to it from just a tiny little bit of cobalt in the blue glaze. Then you have this. Now the border on this is very reminiscent of Rockefeller pattern dishes. Those of you that are familiar with China trade, it's not really, but it's very similar. And you have this very fine gilded outer edge. This is all gilded on here. It's beautifully done, and the gilding is intact, which is almost a miracle. I thought the condition of this plate is really quite exceptional. And then you have the bat at the top with a building overlooking a pond, almost looks like the summer palace, with a couple of big willow trees going out. And then on this side, you have a couple of birds sitting on a rock with another bat. So you have birds, palaces, and some geese over here. And again, another bat tying together the cartouche. And then at the bottom here, a landscape scene with another bat. Just a wonderfully done thing, but it's in remarkable condition. Remarkable condition. And the back of it looks like this. This is another type of foot rim you see on these. You'll notice the foot rim on this is not that narrow one that we saw before. It's got a sort of a flat face to it, slanted in from the outside, and then this. So it does. This is what the foot looks like. This is on the inside. This is on the outside leading up to it. And the carver would trim it along this little ridge right here to get the shape right, so they could form the inside face of the foot, and then the recessed bottom. And there you go. And it looks like the Hussey family crest, whoever they are. I don't know who they are, but you can look them up. And that's what this is. So you're going to see two types of foot rims basically on some of these 18th century pieces: the straight ones and the ones that got a little bit of a face to them going in. All right, and then on to this, the big export bowl made around 1780, nicely gilded, figural scenes on them. And you'll notice sometime on these bowls, the facial characteristics, the eyes and the noses are very hard to see. And the reason is they were painted over, but they did them with very tiny brushes with only tiny bits of paint. So it doesn't take too many times cleaning the thing to begin to damage the surface of the faces on some of these pieces. So you'll look over here and you don't see a lot of detail, and I think that's probably due to cleaning, overly excited cleaning ladies. And then here's the bottom of it. Lots of little pinholes and odds and ends that you should see there. And then this big foot, and you have a black line, and that's from resting on tables and stands and whatnot. But you have this very nice ivory sort of coating to the glaze. Now, one of the things I had said before was that they don't generally put on the copies, they don't use gilding in the hair. The other day I found one that has gilding in the hair, and I'm going to use it in a video in a couple of days. I'll probably throw it in the Friday video because I've never seen it done before, but they're starting to realize that, oh, we forgot to gild the hair on the copy. So now they're putting gilding in the hair of the copies of rose canton, rose mandarin pieces. And they would probably be doing it in some late 18th century copies as well. All right, and then over to this, the Flying Griffin's dish. These turn up every once in a while. It's funny, these plates I think are really beautiful, and they don't sell for any money. I don't know why. People do not pay a lot of money for this pattern. There were just recently a couple of these that came up, and I think they went for $100. I don't know why. It's a mystery to me. Maybe one of you know. But this is a nice looking plate, and there's the back of it. Again, unglazed, concave. And this one, you can see a little bit of activity here, a little bit of something from the contact point on tabletops over the years. And they do wear. They absolutely get wear to them from being on surfaces. And then this is also an 18th century late Qianlong export vase. And this is one of these, they call them chicken skin vases sometimes because it is this very light stippling on the ground. Sometimes it's in a pattern, sometimes it's not. Up here, and then they do the very classic, this is almost a stock pattern with 1780s Chinese export ware. This is pattern, you see it on tea sets, you see it on bowls, you see it on dinner services, tureens, you name it. This pattern appears on all of them. It was such a popular thing. It was done by many, many kilns knew how to do this pattern, and they did to great success because a lot of these ended up in Europe and America. A lot of them went to England. There were a lot of this pattern in England, and very, very attractive. And they've got these blue handles like tree trunks or fungus. And here's the bottom of it. Not much to see. It's a lobed form, so they ended up in this example giving it a rather flat, wide foot, and then they beveled the interior. This beveling again, like you saw on the biscuit wares and the tea dust on the figure wares. And around the bottoms, you have this very tidy little bevel, and then they just put sort of a quick white glaze on there without a lot else. All right, and here's another one from that same era, quite similar in tone and feeling These turn up all the time. Now you notice on here that all the gilding is worn off. This is what happens. These corners are very prone to wear, and a few douses of ammonia will strip that gilding right off. If somebody cleaned with that, it'll strip the gilding right away. In here, it's still present, but on the high points on the edges where it gets rubbed and cleaned with the most pressure, it's gone, comes off. But the clothes and the figures are very similar to the piece we just looked at. And there's a picture of the bottom. Fairly narrow foot rim, very nicely done, white porcelain trimmed. It's a little dirty. They're all a little dirty, but if you imagine this cleaned, what it would look like, it would be absolutely beautiful color. And then the Buddhist altar sticks. These turn up once in a while in the market. This was one that I had here for a long time. And the deal with these was that they were produced for the emperor to be used as gifts for visiting monks. They were never given rain marks. They never put rain marks on them. And they're pretty collectible. As we found out, I liked it a great deal. I had it for a long time, and they now, with the copies of these, because these are selling for good money, they've been selling well for the last 15 or so years. They're now starting to make copies of them in different colors, including blue, turquoise, yellow. They sell them in pairs. They were never done blue, yellow, turquoise. They were never made in pairs for display of that purpose. It was to be one, and it's in the form of a stupa, of course, in a Buddhist tradition. And these are very, very wonderfully done. And these were done as gifts to be presented by the emperor. There's actually a photograph of the Qianlong, painting rather, not a photo, but a painting of Qianlong holding one of these at a table that's out there. And there's what the foot rim looks on like this. Very white, very flat, very even, very perfectly done. Very, very nicely done with a good glossy underside to them. All right. And then there's the blue cobalt ground bowl. This isn't a fancy bowl. This is sort of a provincial Marken period bowl. It's not, it's not high-end imperial ware, but I wanted to show it because it's a good example of a Marken period bowl that's not imperial, but nicely done nonetheless. And this is it. I like the shifts in color in the blue. I like the light blue at the bottom. Love the potting of it. It's got sort of a high rim that comes up. It looks like it has a high rim that sort of pops up on the end. And then on the bottom, it looks like this. Fairly simple, lots of dimples and whatnot from bubbles under the glaze. Very narrow foot and almost glazed to the top. You notice they did a good job glazing this. They got the glaze almost to the top of the foot, it wasn't something they did that often. And very attractive. Then the hunt bowl. This is a nice one, typically for the English market. They made lots of them. Very, very attractive. Always. These even bring good money when they're damaged. It doesn't seem to bother anybody too much. This was a lovely example. When you flip it over, that's what it looks like. They shouldn't have the star crack there, but these bowls got used. These old hunt bowls. It's amazing the condition some of them turn up and they're stapled together, glued together, you name it. And this one has only a star crack in it. It might have had some other damage. I don't remember exactly. I don't think it did. It was just that. I think this went through Freeman's a month or two ago. And again, you have this very nicely finished foot. It's got a little bit of a ridge here, but not over here. So it might have been something that happened when they were trimming it, because you'll notice here, but it doesn't continue over here. So there was something going on when the potter was finishing the foot of this, but the rest of it looks absolutely fine. And the decoration on in the front absolutely looks fine. Remember, the decoration has to match the foot rim. The drapes have to match the carpet, in other words. All right, and then over to this, you have this very nice plate, again, this very lovely loose sort of drawing that they were famous for with the serrated leaf going down and up and float. The whole thing gives the impression of floating. And then look at the colors. Absorb what the colors look like, what they should look like. They shouldn't. The red shouldn't be any darker than this because then it would start to look brown. The blue enamel should be translucent. The greens should be bright and cheerful, and the borders should be wonderfully controlled. All right, but it should never look mechanical. If it looks mechanical, run for your life. And then you have the back of it. Looks like this. Some sort of old tag there. I don't know what that says. But you'll notice on this one, the glaze here got, up, 50% of the foot, and here it did 80% of the foot. And this can happen. You'll see pieces like this because they were turning out whole sets of these, obviously, glazing them. Sometimes the glaze crept more in other areas than they did in other areas. So you'll have some inconsistencies with that. But in general, the bases of these always look the same. The copies they're turning out today also tend to be much too tan and much too brown. And then on to this, the blue enameled flowers. Again, not too dissimilar from the plate we just looked at. Sort of the kissing cousin to that one. You'll notice the style of this plate, The center style is very similar. They just use different colors and laid it out a little differently, but very similar in how the leaves were drawn. Everything is sort of a sense of motion, but suspended in the air, and very no stress. So you notice here, there's one of the petals is folding over, and in here you have the whole thing looks very natural. It doesn't look mechanical. It doesn't look stiff. And then you have the puce borders surrounded by gilding and so forth. It's all very loose and natural looking, and that's what you want to see. And then when you flip it over, this is what you get. I guess this was a piece we sold some time ago. Very, very nice foot rim on it. It's kind of dirty. The foot on this was dirty. But you'll notice the glaze, as it doesn't have that super glossy surface to it. It's a little bit of a matte finish. And again, the foot rim is ivory, not too dissimilar from the foot rims you see on Kangxi dishes. Well, this is 2 emperors later. They're still doing it. All right. They're not exactly the same, but they'll be close enough for hand grenades. And right now, if you're just learning this stuff, hand grenades is all you can hope for, because differentiating between end of Yongzheng and beginning of Qianlong is extremely hard, even for people in the business. So don't try. In some cases, sometimes it's easy, but other times it's harder. So don't stress too much about that. Just stress about being able to spot copies that are trying to trick you, and being able to spot 18th century examples when you see them. And this is one of those cases, again, where I mentioned the facial characteristics tend to rub off after a long time, or are not as easily seen. This is a classic case of it. They look like they have lips and mouths, because that requires more pigment, but very little is required to do the eyes and ears. So it's been rubbed down over the years. It's still there, traces of it there, but very, very faint. And you have this lovely cobalt blue border, honeycomb inner border. This bowl was made probably around 1780 or 90. Very pretty bowl, and that's the foot rim. That's what the bottom of it looks like. Bluish tinge, decidedly blue. This very lovely white foot going around. And if you examine this all the way around, I wouldn't be at all surprised to find the glaze drapes and dips and flows up and down a little bit here and there. And not so much on the outside, but generally on the inside you see that. And here you have this very nice foot. Again, that flattened face type of outer foot rim coming in. And this one's has a little more height on the inside, and then it meets the foot, goes across, and then dips down inside. But this is all from trimming. It's all trimming. All right, and then over to this. This is a 1870s export plate. It's a funny pattern. I see these often. For some reason, people in France love this pattern. They look like the Who's from Whoville. Some of the women in here with the hair. I've always thought that. But this is an interesting plate because there's a really good sense of movement to it. You notice on the lantern, the tassels hanging off the lanterns are blowing back. The tassels off the umbrella are blowing back. These are pushing back. There's flow in the ropes. So they really were able to give the impression of movement when they did this. And the colors are crisp and clean. The yellow in particular is a very clean color, rather lovely. And when you pop this thing in a little closer, you can see there's some wear or something happened here. But notice the translucency of the yellow. And there's 2 shades of yellow here, which is sort of interesting. And then the Figural rose enamels and whatnot. And everybody's got it sort of a different face going. It's rather a nice plate. And there's the back of it. Again, you have that foot rim with that outer edge coming in, and then across and then down. Very nicely done. And like I said before, not a heck of a lot different than Kangxi pieces. Really not. And this is another Figural rose vase. Again, the colors look good. The shape is good. You have this beautiful 3D effect they were able to do with ink drawing the table that the kid is sitting on. And then you have the mom leaning over. What it is they're doing there. Oh, they're getting ready to have some fruit. And the sister is behind him. Looks like she's pulling something maybe out of a bag or out from under something for him. And there's the bottom of it. That's the foot rim. Again, that wide outer foot, and then sloping down to the inside, and so forth. And this one came from C.T. Lu. This is one that's in the Palace Museum. It's a very, very, very fine, incredibly fine, underglazed red and underglazed blue dragon base with dragons swimming in the waves. There's the bottom of it. Lots of stickers and junk on there, the way museum pieces always do, but very nicely done foot rim on here. A little bit of wear in places from just being on tabletops. But all I'll say about this is they're making stupendous copies of these. There's only a couple of these vases in the world, to speak of, a handful of them. So if you come across one, it's a fake. All right, this is don't waste your time unless you're buying it off the cover of an auction catalog at Skinner's or Christie's, or maybe William Wallace could get one of these in England, or Drew Eats might get one, or Pandolfini might get one, but not likely. But the major auction houses would be much more inclined to get them. But if you see one anywhere else, just put it down and walk away. Don't get yourself in trouble. And the same thing goes for this. This is one of these peach form Chanchu Ping vases. This is a Qianlong example. And notice how well the peaches are drawn. They have a very sort of naturalistic look to them. Not that they're rotting, but you can see the elements, how they affect the surface of peach. You have these little dark areas and blotches and whatnot. Typical. All right, and then when you come over here, I've taken, I want people to see this. This is a copy of one. This is a late Qing example, early Republic. This is what they look like. And the modern ones look exactly like this, so you really cannot tell the difference. This is a brand new one. This is an old one. And if you look at these two side by side, it doesn't take long to see the stark difference. The detail work of each peach and how they were done, and the three-dimensionality visually of the tree that is hanging off of the flowers, the way they push back and darken slightly, versus this, which looks like it's too bright, too strong, shallow. There's no depth here. This has no depth. This section has a lot of depth to it. This is what it should look like. All right. And there's another look at the correct way the peaches are done. It should have all these little blotches on it and fading of pink, because they would blow the red on with straws, and sometimes clumps of it would come out and hit on here, the red, and causes these spots. So they're never the same twice. And that's the bottom of it. That's what it looks like. Again, this is one of the examples that is that round bullnose foot I talked about before. And here it is again on the bottom of Chanchu Ping. Okay. And then hopping along, there's another shot of it. This is an unglazed bottom piece. I just wanted to show this one example. Famille Rose enamels, beautifully done, beautiful colors, beautiful, sharp, crisp, vibrant colors. You can even see the turning lines a little bit here in the body. If you look carefully, you can even see the turnings. If you look down inside, you'd be able to see them much better. The outside, they tended to smooth them out more. But when you flip the piece over, it's completely unglazed from the foot rim down. That's what they look like, and they did make these unglazed. This isn't something highly unusual, and quite a few of them they did unglazed, because they weren't going to put rain marks on them. There was no reason to. It was going to be exported, and they would turn them out this way. And again, you have this very nice looking paste. It's rather dirty, I'm assuming, but you have areas here where it's very, very white, where it's been rubbing on surfaces or touching things. That's what this whole foot would look like if it were all cleaned off. If it was completely cleaned, it would turn very, very white. All right. And there's a better shot of it. And then these are old, and I'm going to stop with these. If you come across any porcelains like these archaistic sort of bronze types that have fully enclosed in glaze, these are real. These are in the Palace Collection, I believe, or they're either in the Palace Collection or at the British Museum. Do not even think about buying them. Okay, these are old. These are absolutely old, but they're so rare and so difficult to spot the copies, and the chances of you coming across a pair of these in lime green, or one of them even in lime green, is zero. All right, there's the bottom of it. It looks brand new. The only reason it doesn't, to me, look brand new is the way the foot looks, and the decoration on the body of the piece is also stupendous. That doesn't mean it couldn't be replicated. It certainly could. If somebody got a hold of the original to this, they could make a mold right off of it, and probably get away with it by crisping up the mold a little bit to make the edges sharper when they used it. But this is a very nicely done, very smooth, glass-like foot rim. I can tell you, if you ran your foot over that, it would feel just as smooth as a sheet of plate glass from a window. Beautifully done. But you're not going to come across one of those. And these I'm just showing for the fun of it. There's only a few of these in the world. I think the British Museum has one or two, and the Palace Museum has a couple, and that's it. So if you see any of these out here in the world, just walk away from it. It's a copy. It's a copy. It's a copy. So I can't say it any more than that. There's the bottom of it, and so forth. All right, so that sort of covers the Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong period. I'm gonna, as I said, I'll post the pictures. This was sort of a long video even for me, but I wanted to get it done for everybody. I thought you find it interesting. I hope you did. A lot of images here. We'll upload all of them and probably some extras when it's done. But the big thing is common sense when you're out there looking at ceramics that have 18th century marks on them. Common sense. You wouldn't expect to find, a Picasso at a yard sale. Don't expect to find a Marken period Qianlong vase at a yard sale. You're more likely to find the Picasso. You're more likely to find a great painting by a great artist in the West in a yard sale in a junk shop in America or in Europe than you are to find some enormous rarity of Chinese ceramic just sleeping there quietly. Because they just didn't make them that often. But there's this idea that, well, it says Qianlong on the bottom, it must be Qianlong. Well, no. If it said Monet, you wouldn't believe that, would you? I hope not. But they turn up just often enough out of the blue. Once or twice a year, a piece comes out of the woodwork somewhere, and people say, "Oh, there you are. There's one that was discovered." When in fact, most of the time they aren't really discovered. They were identified by somebody in the family that owned it years and years ago. Person died and went unidentified for a couple of years. But people that have things that are good, that have nice things, generally know where to send them when they find them. So it's fairly rare that enormous rarities turn up in rural places for auction. There's a natural river that flows and brings them to the majors or to major dealers. A lot of major dealers are great to deal with also for selling things because people often can do better with a dealer than they can selling it at auction. Simple reality. All right, that's it. Subscribe if you haven't. I hope you found this interesting, and we'll be doing one on Ming Footrims at some point too, and we'll make it a little set. Okay, have a good week. See you on Friday. Bye-bye.